Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are on a mission, really. We're trying to build a better mental toolkit.
And we're drawing from some pretty heavy-hitting fields to do it: cognitive psychology, behavioral economics.
Right. The goal is to get a better handle on the architecture of human judgment. Not to, criticize our minds, but to actually understand them.
It's about giving you a vocabulary, a way to name these very predictable, systematic errors that we all make.
We call them cognitive biases.
Yeah.
And it all starts with, well, it's almost like two characters inside your head.
That's the foundation of this entire way of thinking. You have system one and you have system two.
System one is that intuitive, automatic, just lightning fast part of you, the engine that's always on.
Yeah, it's, without even thinking how to complete the phrase bread and butter.
Butter, it just comes to you.
Exactly. And then there's system two. That's the slow, effortful, deliberate thinker.
That's the one you have to consciously call on when system one just can't cut it, when you need real focused attention.
Right, for calculation, deep concentration.
Okay, let's try to actually feel the difference. If you're listening to this and you're not driving, try this with us.
Calculate this in your head. 17 multiplied by 24.
Okay, so right away you feel something. Your system one knows it's a multiplication problem.
It recognizes it instantly, but it has no idea what the answer is. It just can't generate it.
So your system two has to lumber into action. You have to, pull up the mental program for multiplication, hold the numbers in your memory.
It's a real effort. It is a cognitive sprint. This is not a casual stroll.
And it's not just in your head. It's physical. Your muscles are probably tensing up right now. Your blood pressure is rising. And, goodness, your pupils are dilating.
And they will stay dilated, burning more glucose than usual until you either get the answer, which is 408, by the way, or you just give up.
And that's the whole point, isn't it? System one is running the show almost all the time.
And system two, which is supposed to be quality control, is just, well, it's lazy. It wants to conserve energy.
So that preference for the easy path is where all these predictable errors start to creep in.
But before we get into the errors, it's worth saying that system one is brilliantly efficient most of the time.
Oh, absolutely. It's constantly scanning, generating these immediate impressions and intuitions.
And a lot of the time, it's dead on. Think of a chess master glancing at a board and just knowing the right move, or an experienced firefighter sensing a building is about to collapse.
That's expert intuition.
It is. It's system one building a really accurate model of a familiar situation. The problem is you can't turn it off.
And when it sees a hard question, it tends to just swap in an easier one. But we'll get to that.
Right. First, that cost of using system two, it's a real limited resource.
We all know this intuitively. Think about being a passenger in a car. The driver's trying to overtake a huge truck on a narrow road. What happens?
The conversation just stops. Everyone instinctively goes quiet.
Yeah, because the driver has hit their attentional limit. All their system two resources are focused on that one task.
And if you push that to the absolute extreme, you can become temporarily blind. I mean, literally.
You have to be talking about the invisible gorilla study.
Of course. The classic demonstration. So they have people intensely focus on counting basketball passes, a pure system two task.
And it's so demanding that, about half the people?
Roughly half, yeah. They completely fail to see a person in a full gorilla suit walk right into the middle of the players, stop, thump their chest, and walk off.
For 9 whole seconds. It's unbelievable. Intense focus makes you blind to what should be completely obvious.
And that tension, that conflict between the two systems, that's what we call self-control.
It's like trying to force yourself to read a really boring but important document.
Or trying not to stare at the, oddly dressed person at the next table in a restaurant. That effort uses the same limited pool of mental energy as doing math.
And this links directly to our mood, our state of mind.
Exactly. When you're in a state of what we call cognitive ease, everything feels good. You're in a good mood, things feel familiar, you trust your gut.
But the downside is you're thinking more superficially. System two is kind of asleep at the wheel.
And the opposite is cognitive strain. You're working on a hard problem, you feel vigilant, suspicious, less intuitive.
But you also make fewer mistakes.
You make fewer logical errors, that's right. But it feels bad, and you're less creative. S2 is in charge, but it's not happy about it.
So when system one is just breezing along in that state of ease, that's when it starts taking these shortcuts.
And that's the origin of bias. The most fundamental shortcut is something called substitution.
Okay, let's break that down. So we're faced with a hard question, the target question.
Right, and System 1, instead of trying to answer that, just swaps it out for an easier related one, the heuristic question.
So for example, the hard question is, how popular will the president be in 6 months?
And the easy question your brain actually answers is, how do I feel about the president right now? It's a question about emotion, which is immediately available.
That's a perfect example. And this drive for what feels right and coherent leads us straight to the halo effect.
Yeah, our first impression of something just colors everything that comes after.
So if I describe Alan as, say, intelligent, industrious, impulsive, stubborn...
You already have a pretty positive view. The first two words set the stage. But if I introduce Ben with the exact same words, just in the reverse order, stubborn, impulsive, industrious, intelligent.
he sounds like a much more difficult person, even though the traits are identical.
Exactly. The word stubborn means something completely different when it comes after intelligent than when it comes first. The initial impression creates the story.
And that leads to maybe the most important concept of all, the one that explains so much.
WYSEAD.
What you see is all there is.
It's such a critical idea. System 1 builds the best, most coherent story it can, using only the information it has right in front of it.
It doesn't ask what's missing.
It doesn't even know that anything could be missing. If the story makes sense, it feels true.
Which is the direct cause of overconfidence. Your feeling of confidence is just a measure of how good the story is in your head.
Not how good the evidence for it is. Not at all.
And nothing shows the raw power of System 1 quite like anchoring.
This is where a number, just any number, can completely warp your subsequent judgments.
And it doesn't have to be a relevant number.
Yeah.
It can be totally random.
That's the most shocking part. They did a study with experienced German judges.
Okay.
They had them read a case about a shoplifter. Then they asked them to roll a pair of loaded dice. The dice would only land on a 3 or a 9.
So completely random, meaningless number.
Totally. And then they asked the judges what prison sentence they would give the shoplifter.
And you're telling me that dice roll mattered.
It mattered a lot. The judges who rolled a 9 gave an average sentence of 8 months. Those who rolled a 3, 5 months.
That is terrifying. They knew the number was random, but their brains couldn't ignore it.
The unconscious anchor was just too powerful.
So the challenge is getting System 2 to wake up and do its job, to check these crazy intuitive answers.
Which it often fails to do. You see this perfectly in something called the cognitive reflection test.
Ah, yes. The bat and ball problem.
The most famous one. A bat and a ball cost $1.10 in total. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost?
And the answer that just screams out at you from System 1 is 10 cents.
It's immediate, it feels right, but it's wrong.
Because if the ball is 10 cents and the bat is $1 more, the bat is the $1.10, the total would be $1.20.
The correct answer is 5 cents. A 5-cent ball and a $1.05 bat. That failure to just do that simple check is a perfect sign of an impulsive system, too.
And these failures are just devastating when it comes to any kind of statistical thinking.
Oh, absolutely. We rely so heavily on the representativeness, heuristic, judging probability based on stereotypes.
And we completely ignore what are called base rates.
Yes. The classic example is Steve. He's described as a meek and tidy soul, shy, helpful, with a passion for detail.
The perfect librarian stereotype.
Exactly. So when you ask people, is Steve more likely to be a librarian or a farmer, almost everyone says librarian.
But they're forgetting the base rate. The simple fact that there are vastly, vastly more male farmers in the population than male librarians.
The odds are overwhelmingly that he's a farmer, no matter how well he fits the stereotype. The vivid story just completely crushes the boring statistic.
And this also feeds into another error, right? The law of small numbers.
Yes, this belief that a small sample is perfectly representative of the whole population.
It leads to some really bad conclusions.
Yeah.
Like, I remember a study that found that the counties in the U.S. with the lowest rates of kidney cancer were all mostly rural.
And the immediate System 1 story is obvious.
Clean living, fresh air, healthy lifestyle.
But it's just statistical noise.
Yeah.
Because if you look at the counties with the highest rates of kidney cancer,
Let me guess. Also mostly rural.
also mostly rural and sparsely populated, the real lesson is just that small samples produce extreme results, both high and low, just by chance. It had nothing to do with lifestyle.
Okay, what about the availability heuristic?
This one is simple but powerful. We judge how frequent something is by how easily an example comes to mind.
If it's easy to remember, We assume it happens a lot.
And you see this everywhere. There was a great study on married couples. They asked each spouse to estimate their percentage contribution to things like chores or starting arguments.
I have a feeling I know where this is going.
Of course. When you added up their percentages, the total was always way over 100%. Both people genuinely believed they did most of the work.
Because their own contributions are just so much more available in their memory.
Your own efforts are vivid. Your partner's are less so.
And when this hits the public sphere, you can get an availability cascade.
Right. A dramatic, emotional story gets a ton of media coverage, and suddenly a very minor threat seems huge.
We focus on the tragic numerator.
And completely ignore the statistical denominator. It leads to really irrational public policy.
This whole framework really challenges our idea of ourselves as rational beings, especially when we look backwards.
The first barrier there is hindsight bias, the I knew it all along effect.
As soon as something happens, our brain instantly weaves a story that makes it seem like it was inevitable.
It makes the past seem far more predictable than it actually was. They showed this with Nixon's trip to China in '72. Before the trip, they asked people to assign probabilities to different outcomes.
And after?
After the trip, when they asked people to recall the probabilities they had assigned, they systematically exaggerated the odds they had given to the things that actually happened.
We rewrite our own memories to make the world make sense.
And that feeds this dangerous illusion of skill, especially in so-called experts.
Like stock pickers.
Stock pickers, political pundits.
Yeah.
One survey found that the stock market forecasts of chief financial officers had a correlation with reality that was slightly less than zero.
Less than zero. So they'd have been better off just flipping a coin.
Pretty much. True expertise, true expert intuition, it only works in environments that are incredibly regular and give you fast, clear feedback.
Like a firefighter or a doctor. Not a political pundit trying to predict the future.
Exactly. The famous study by Philip Tetlock on political experts found they performed worse than random chance. And crucially, the ones with the most knowledge were often the most overconfident and the most wrong.
So if even the experts are so prone to error, what's the solution? How do we make better decisions?
We have to rely less on that feeling of unaided intuition and more on disciplined data collection. Simple formulas and checklists consistently outperform expert judgment in these noisy fields.
It's about disciplining intuition, not getting rid of it.
That's the key. The Israeli army learned this. They used to conduct these very freewheeling interviews with recruits.
All based on the interviewer's gut feeling.
Right. Then they switched to a system where interviewers had to score recruits on 6 specific objective traits first. No intuition allowed yet.
And the interviewers hated it.
They felt like robots, so a compromise was made. After they did the objective scoring, they were allowed to close their eyes and give one final, holistic, intuitive score.
And what happened?
The objective scores were a much, much better predictor of performance. The final intuitive score did add a little bit of predictive value, but only after the disciplined data was collected.
Data first, intuition second.
That's the lesson.
This brings us to choice and how we value things, which turns out to be very different from how classical economics assumed.
It starts with prospect theory. And the core idea is that we don't judge things in terms of our total wealth. We judge them as gains and losses relative to a reference point.
Which leads directly to loss aversion.
Yes. Losing hurts about twice as much as an equivalent gain feels good. Losses just loom larger psychologically.
You see this in relationships too, right?
You do. For a relationship to be stable, positive interactions have to outnumber negative ones by at least 5 to 1. You need 5 good things to cancel out the psychological weight of one bad thing.
And this theory forces us to see that we're kind of split in two.
We are. You have the experiencing self, which lives in the present and feels things, and the remembering self, which tells the story of what happened.
And the remembering self is a terrible bookkeeper.
It's incredibly biased. It's governed by the peak end rule. It basically ignores the duration of an experience and just averages the most intense moment, the peak, and how it felt at the very end.
The cold hand experiment is just the most mind-bending example of this.
It really is. People put their hand in painfully cold water. One trial is for 60 seconds. A second, longer trial is for 90 seconds. But for the final 30 seconds, the water gets slightly less cold.
So the second trial involves more total pain, objectively.
30 seconds more pain. But when asked which trial they'd rather repeat, people consistently chose the longer one.
Because it had a better ending.
Because the remembering self created a better story about it. They literally chose more pain to have a better memory.
Our memory of an event trumps the actual reality of it. And this all sets us up for the focusing illusion.
Which is just that whatever you are paying attention to at the moment seems far more important than it really is.
Like when people think Californians must be happier because of the climate.
Exactly. When you ask the question, people focus on the obvious difference, the weather, and they ignore the countless other things, the traffic, the cost of living that are the same or worse. You substitute one part for the whole.
So let's try to pull all this together. We've got these two systems. System 1 is telling easy, coherent stories all the time.
And system 2 is often just too busy or too lazy to step in and correct them.
Which leaves us with this machine that's great for getting through the day, but is full of these predictable bugs. WYSID, the halo effect, neglecting base rates.
The list goes on, but the real value of this deep dive, I think, is just getting the vocabulary.
Being able to put a name to it. When you can say, wait, that sounds like an availability cascade, or I think we're being anchored here, it gives you a tool.
It's a language for quality control, for your own decisions, and for decisions in your family or your organization.
Which leaves us with one final thought to take away.
Right, and it's this. That feeling of confidence you have in a belief, that feeling is not a reflection of evidence or truth. It is simply a reflection of the cognitive ease and the coherence of the story your mind just built. That's all it is, a feeling.
So the most rational thing you can do, even when a story feels perfect,
especially when it feels perfect, is to stop and ask one simple question. What information is missing from the story?